Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something pretty incredible. We're stepping way back in time to reconstruct the literal, sensory world of our ancestors, to figure out what they actually ate to survive. So we're not just going to stare at dusty dates on a timeline. We're going to virtually stand around their hearths, smell what's cooking, and truly understand the daily survival habits that sustained ordinary people across hundreds of thousands of years.
So, what did our prehistoric ancestors actually eat? It's a massive question, right? And honestly, to find the real answer, we've got to completely ignore modern marketing fads and trendy lifestyle blogs. Instead, we are diving straight into the archaeological dirt. We're going to crack open this ultimate mystery by looking at the actual microscopic evidence left behind in ancient teeth and the chemical signatures permanently locked inside ancient bones.
Because as you'll see, the reality of prehistoric survival totally shatters our modern assumptions. You know that popular idea of the paleo diet, the one with the rigid rules and mountains of meat? Well, it turns out that's a huge contrast to the actual, incredibly adaptable human condition of the past. Our ancestors didn't follow strict dietary rules. They had this profound geographical awareness. They were the ultimate opportunists, adapting on the fly to whatever their specific local climate and environment threw at them.
Okay, let's get into Section 1, the biological spark, Paleolithic fire. To really wrap our heads around human dietary history, we have to start way back in the Paleolithic era. Because the control of fire, it wasn't just a new way to prep dinner. It was a slow-burning technological revolution that quite literally reshaped our anatomy. Think about it. About 1 million years ago at Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, we spot the very first ash and burned bones. Fast forward to about 780,000 years ago, and we're seeing systematically maintained hearths. This changed everything. It shifted human existence from raw, desperate survival out in the wild to creating communities actually anchored around the warmth, the light, and the absolute safety of a shared fire.
And here's the wild part. Cooking food was a profound biological trade-off. It's like a giant evolutionary transaction. Once early humans started eating softer cooked foods, those massive heavy jaws and super long colons, which they desperately needed to digest tough raw plants and raw meat, well, they started to shrink. They just didn't need them anymore. In exchange, the massive surplus of extracted energy they got from cooked food went straight to fueling a much larger, incredibly energy-hungry and complex brain.
Which brings us to Section 2, the forager's rhythm, Mesolithic scale.
Now, as we move forward into the post-Ice Age Mesolithic era, human survival strategies get really fascinating. To understand these folks, we have to imagine a truly expansive existence. They were so deeply attuned to the shifting rhythms of nature. The famous anthropologist Louis Binford hit the nail on the head when he said, we can't just look at a tiny 5-foot excavation square. No, we have to visualize these communities moving fluidly across vast, sweeping territories. We're talking upwards of 300,000 square kilometers. They were constantly shifting their camps to harvest nature's migrating resources.
And when they hit the jackpot on those resources, the scale of their labor was just staggering. Picture this. Try to imagine the sheer mechanical effort, the endless sound of cracking shells, and the thick, smoky aroma of up to 200,000 hazelnuts roasting all at once in massive communal pits. This was at a site called Stasnaig on the Scottish Isle of Colonsay. Good luck fitting that into your modern Sunday meal prep, right? This wasn't casual foraging. This was intense, highly organized, industrial-scale processing of seasonal harvests.
And out on the coastlines, their lives were completely tethered to the sensory reality of the ocean. Archaeologists can actually analyze tiny fish ear bones, they're called otoliths, to pinpoint the exact season these camps were occupied. It's brilliant. These people dynamically tracked migrating fish, they harvested massive amounts of autumn shellfish at places like Knock Coig, they engineered incredibly clever tidal fish traps at Fiscary Bay, and they hunted seals, right as the brutal winter winds dictated their movements. They were perfectly in sync with the sea.
Let's move to Section 3, the bioarchaeological lens, how we know.
Now, you might be sitting there wondering, how on earth do historians reconstruct a vanished world with such vivid microscopic detail? Well, it's actually pretty amazing. We literally look into the mouths of our ancestors. You know that dental plaque your dentist scrapes off your teeth? Well, in ancient people, that plaque mineralized into something called dental calculus, and it acts as a perfect biological time capsule. Because it hardens so quickly over a person's lifetime, it permanently traps microscopic food residues, protecting the literal physical remains of prehistoric meals from decaying for thousands of years.
And what we find in there is a real game changer.
These tiny, surviving starch grains completely dismantle the myth of an entirely meat-based past. We recovered these starches from the teeth of Paleolithic and Mesolithic individuals, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that processing and eating wild plants was an absolutely fundamental survival strategy, way before farming was ever even a thought.
We also use something called stable isotope analysis. Basically, by measuring the ratios of elements, specifically carbon and nitrogen, inside ancient bone collagen, we can literally read the chemical signatures of the proteins these people ate. It gives us this incredible decade-long average of an individual's diet. So it turns out the old saying, "you are what you eat," is scientifically exactly true.
Up next is Section 4, the bittersweet harvest, Neolithic agriculture.
Okay, so here's where the dramatic plot twist happens. Around 11,700 years ago, the agricultural revolution kicks off. And this transition reveals a huge historical contradiction. Sure, the shift to farming produced massive caloric wealth. It gave us surplus food, permanent villages, and eventually modern civilization. But there was a catch. Because they narrowed their diets to just a few staple crops like wheat and barley, the actual nutritional quality for the average everyday person completely plummeted compared to the incredibly diverse diets of their foraging ancestors.
But human ingenuity didn't stop there. This brings us to the secondary products revolution. See, early farmers faced a massive hurdle. Almost all of them were lactose intolerant. Drinking raw milk would have made them incredibly sick. But they figured out a biochemical workaround. By using specialized perforated pottery to strain out the lactose-heavy whey, they successfully transformed milk into easily digestible cheese. And we know this for sure because scientists have actually extracted the specific lipid biomarkers of ancient milk fats still trapped in the tiny pores of these 6,000-year-old ceramic cheese strainers. How cool is that?
Finally, let's look at Section 5, the ultimate prehistoric diet.
So, zooming out to a massive civilizational perspective here, tracing millions of years from those early fire makers all the way down to Neolithic cheesemakers, what's the big takeaway? The absolute, undeniable truth is that humans are not biologically bound to a single quote-unquote natural diet. Our very anatomy evolved alongside our technology, and our ancestors survived by exploiting wildly diverse, extreme ecosystems. From hunting giant Ice Age mammals on the tundra, to gathering coastal shellfish, to roasting hundreds of thousands of hazelnuts, human survival has always been about opportunistic flexibility, absolutely not dietary rigidity.
Which leaves me with one final, provocative question for us today. If the very core of prehistoric human survival, the literal reason we conquered the globe, was our incredible, profound dietary flexibility, why are we so utterly desperate to restrict ourselves to a rigid, paleo diet today? The history of human food isn't some strict, boring recipe we're supposed to follow. It's a magnificent testament to human ingenuity. We are and always have been the incredibly adaptable ape.